Michael Rosing in Sydney, Australia. Thank you for joining us for this Nodal Systems webinar on the topic of using technology to improve collections performance. Joining me on this webinar is Brad Starr from Nodal Systems. Brad is our Senior Solutions Consultant here in Australia. And Brad has over 7 years experience with Nodal, many years of experience in the contact centre solutions area, and he previously managed the collections operations for GE Capital in Australia. We also have with us Matt Tyler from ARMS Global, who's one of our customers. ARMS Global are a credit management and debt recovery services organisation, and they were established in Australia in 1975. ARMS Global has extensive collections industry knowledge, and they use the latest technology and compliance systems. They also utilise the Noble Enterprise solution, and Matt was previously responsible for collections within ARMS and is now a PPMS manager at ARMS. PPMS stands for Professional Services or Professional Practices Management System, and Matt's function as PPMS manager encompasses implementing, auditing and maintaining all areas of the business. It's largely a project, quality and risk management function. And Matt has worked with ARMS since 2005 and spent 3 years running the collections team, and he also wrote the business case that led to the selection of the Noble solution. So Matt's in Brisbane today, and the three of us will be taking you through the webinar, the purpose of which is to raise your awareness of some of the available technologies that exist to enable you to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of your collections performance and to decrease your overall cost. Now, during the session, we will be taking written questions. Your phones are actually muted, so you can't ask questions over the phone. And we'll respond to those questions either during or at the end of the webinar. So if you have a question regarding anything that we're discussing during the webinar, please utilise your question toolbar, which is at the top of your screen, to type and send us those questions. And at the conclusion of the webinar, we'll make a copy of the webinar available to you upon request. And any outstanding questions, we will deal with those questions directly with you in follow-up. So once again, just reiterating the purpose of today's webinar is to show you how you can use technology to dramatically increase your collections performance and lower your costs now. And that's what we plan to take you through today. So let's look at some of the common problems being experienced in collections operations today. Here at Noble, we've been involved with a market research organisation recently and have surveyed hundreds of collections operations in Australia, both large and small, and thousands of collections operations around the globe, including the US, UK and Asia Pac. In Australia, we have customers ranging from 500 seats down to 5 seats. And these are some of the common problems that keep surfacing within the research and throughout these collections operations. And they basically seem to get rounded off into 4 main categories. The most common by far is the human resource issue. And funnily enough, as you probably all realise, that's also the most expensive resource you have. So staffing, training and turnover or retention are all really important human resource issues, which can become a problem, particularly a cost and morale problem if not handled correctly. The second is collector or agent productivity. That is improving the performance, efficiency and effectiveness of your collectors. Thirdly, a lot of you are concerned about maintaining compliance. This can be a combination of financial systems and regulatory compliance, and also the various requirements your clients are putting on you regarding compliance to standards and things such as security issues. And of course, last but not least, everyone these days is interested in how you can reduce costs and manage growth. I mean, it's probably a good time to be in the collections business. The global financial crisis has meant there is still a lot of inactivity out there and lots of debt to collect that needs to be recovered. And as a result, there's a lot of growth opportunities, but many collections organisations that we've been talking to have found that even though they have the opportunity to grow, they are struggling with how to manage growth whilst keeping costs low. And I'm sure you've all been asked to do more for less during the GFC, whilst at the same time managing good profitability and client service and keeping all the internal stakeholders happy as well. Okay, so let's talk about how we can help solve some of these common problems. If you remember, the first one related to human resources. So how can technology help? Well, one of the first things we can do is unify the collector desktop. That is, get rid of the multiple screens, multiple applications, the alt-tabbing between screens that you may be doing, the mainframes and collection screens if you have them. So the one thing I'd like to say at this stage is that some of you would be using collections applications or collections inventory systems that you're very familiar with and have a lot of capital invested in and don't necessarily want to change that too much. And that's okay. In that case, we can simply work with your existing applications and work on other areas to add value, such as list management strategies, dialing strategies, reporting, recording, and so on. So no need to worry, we won't suggest that you change the stuff that works well. What we will suggest is that we work with that and concentrating on improving and automating other areas. Now, Brad will go into more detail on how we can do this, but in simple terms, it's really about how we can provide you with one screen, one agent or collector desktop to manage all the information you have and all the information you need. So how does this relate to HR? Well, one of the biggest challenges we see when visiting collections operations in the area of staffing and training, particularly new staff, is the length of time that it takes to train a new collector to become what we call revenue producing. In most cases, training takes at least 1 week. In other cases, 4 or 5 weeks before that person is really generating collections revenue. So what we've done with the technology inside the Noble Solution Suite is to provide you with some tool sets to try and simplify that and to get your collectors up to speed as quickly as possible. And that's also where digital recording comes in. I mean, it can be a real asset from a training and development point of view if you can listen to yourself handling a collections call, looking for good stuff, the not so good stuff, areas to improve. All this sort of thing is critical for collectors. So we have clients taking lots of different approaches here, and Matt from ARMS Global will talk a little later on about what ARMS are doing with recording in that regard. Another point is providing consistent feedback to your collectors. I mean, if your collectors are on a commission structure, they'll always be wanting to know exactly where they're at. And if they do know, this enables them to hit their targets and make their commissions, which obviously is going to assist with things like job satisfaction and morale. So having information that shows them how they are tracking both against target and against their peers is really important to them. And we'll show you a simple agent desktop screen that helps you achieve this. Now, again, from a training point of view, one of the most effective things you can do is to simplify the agent task. If you can set up your applications to get the right information to your collectors to where they can get on the phone within 2 to 3 days of training and have all the information at their fingertips, that's when they start to become a real asset to you and they can generate more revenue for you, which becomes critical to your ROI when you're implementing these types of technology solutions. Now, in agent accountability, one of the areas that always surprises us when we're visiting collections operations and even in many contact centre operations when we go in there to observe the way they work and look for ways to help them improve their operations is that we find that very few collections organisations have become truly good at monitoring what their collectors do all day long. And by that I mean evaluating reports to understand when an agent is productive and when they're not. And well, we've taken a bit of a different approach to that, and we're going to talk a little bit about how we can optimise agent accountability, and whether it be through the reporting piece of our solution or whether it be by automating some of the manual stuff. And some of this has been very lucrative for ARMS Global, and Matt will take us through some of that as well. And the last step that is kind of critical to the Noble Systems philosophy of how our solutions work is that we push the work to the agents. And that kind of goes back to the previous point. And I mean, there's a value to ensuring that your agents always have work. The end result is being that you end up dictating and executing on the strategy. I mean, if you leave the strategy and deployment of your collections operations to your collectors and allow every agent to be independent in the way they work, you're not going to have a standard approach. And even though you may have some excellent collectors, you're not going to control your collections floor, and the overall operations will be hampered. So I'll hand over to Brad now, have him show you how we can use Noble Composer Agent Desktop to help unify some of the agent screens.
Okay, so one of the things that I want to talk to you about today is unifying the collector desktop. With Noble Composer, which you see on your screen, it allows you to have all the different tools at the agent's fingertips. For example, the buttons allow the agent to go off to various points within the application. They can go off and do research by branching our way through the web browser or to a notepad if they choose. All these areas are customizable within Composer with our help, or by you for that matter, so that you can be self-sufficient to set up your own campaigns, or things such as call scripting or virtually whatever you like. In the next slide, this is our data contact management screen, where your collectors can, if they choose to set it up this way, work with their own list of accounts. Or you can set it up where everyone works out of the same bucket. And as they choose the account screen, they're color-coded the accounts that they're working on. You can also use this in preview mode where as the collectors are going through their accounts, we'll automatically feed account information to them so they can work on the next one without having to do anything manually. As they select accounts, we bring up the account screen and you can see the various buttons they use, each one represents a different phone number to try the collector or the debtor, for that matter. In the next slide, you also see how you can initiate such things as research from here, where they can go and get information they need. They can go to different systems and pop applications. They can do whatever they want to do. Most importantly, this is easily customizable by you. This is what we like to call the magic or easy buttons, where you can configure them to execute multiple tasks such as enter new accounts, any type of research to the web or other systems, even mainframe systems if you choose to. One of the features of Composer is it allows all that information the collector needs in their own account, in their own hands. It can be easily accessible as well. With the data contact management screen, there is also fully integrated skip tracing, regardless of the skip tracing systems you may already have in use. That brings the skip tracing information to your collector, so they never have to leave the screen. The next screen is an example of the collection screen that can be created. Once again, the unique ability of the Composer tool is the ability to be able to create a variety of customized screens. It's very flexible and easy to use. It's a very simple form tool that allows you to create background information from something as simple as populating background info such as a name, address, phone number, or any maybe complex screen like the one you see in front of you, acting as a summary or wrapper screen for whatever debt collection system you have in use. And what is really useful is the driving collector in the right direction, reducing training times to sometimes hours rather than days, and it unifies what you're currently doing on a consistent basis. The collectors are consistently looking at the same screens, looking at the same information, saying the same things, thereby proving your strategy, following the same processes and procedures over and over again. The other importance about this tool is that you can start with blank canvas and build screens that have business rules. By that, for example, I mean if you're working with different states around Australia with different regulations or demographics, time zones or whatever, you can set business rules to pop that information onto the desktop. You can see on this screen there is also easy buttons configured to go off the mainframe systems or any other systems. We can also populate data in real time or batch mode to any form of variety of systems and databases. We can screen scrape if required to your mainframe system or any CRM system. There is really very little we can't do with this tool in terms of unifying the desktop applications. In the next screen, we show different types of data that can be put in front of the collector. Things like consistent feedback in the forms of data on the performance for the day. Similarly, we can also send messages to the collector on and any information on news updates on that screen in between screens, such as a message of the day, for instance. And that's really all there is regarding the unified desktop solution.
Okay, thanks, Brad. The next thing I want to talk about is how we can help you improve your agent's productivity. That previous section was more about how you can bring your agents up to speed very quickly by providing them with very easy-to-use environments that reduces your training costs and makes them profitable by skilling them up very quickly. The next challenge really comes after you bring them on board and you start looking at what you can be doing with the system to ensure that you're getting the most out of your collectors and ensure that you have a continuous improvement program in place. Now, one of the things that we see sometimes overlooked, but it can be critical to ensuring that you get the right party contact, is something as simple as to post a phone number. Now, I know that ARMS Global do it in a different way. In fact, they go with silent CLI, in some cases for regulatory reasons. But we're also finding that some of our collections customers are finding that by simply changing up the number that gets displayed on CLI on an outbound call, even sometimes on a daily basis, just by putting, say, a local caller ID on the display, some are getting as much as 25 to 30% increase of, one, people answering the phone, and two, people calling back in even if there wasn't a message left, just to find out who called them. Now, you can, of course, report on all of these changes to see what kind of change-up works best for you, which numbers block and so on. So everything you do, you can measure. And this is important because everybody in collections does things differently. You may all have different collection software or all trying different strategies. And if you can't manage it or can't measure it, you can't control it. So good flexible reporting is critical. The other things we're seeing people do in regards to increasing the right party contact is changing up the list rotation and dialing strategies that they have in place. Now, if you're loading the same list in the same order and dialing it the same way every day, the results are not going to change. As a matter of fact, you're actually going to see your results diminish as the list ages and becomes less liquid. So what we recommend is taking a full look at your dialing strategy, and we're going to show you some tools that will allow you to plan out a week, a month, or at least a day, and strategize how you want to approach your list and how you may want to do it different the next time, whether you want to sort it in a different order, whether you want to call homes versus work versus mobile and do that in different orders, and how you can optimize getting right party contacts by churning your lists in different cycles and time frames. Another thing I'd like to point out on right party contacts is that with our system, when you load your list and run through the system on, say, traditional predictive dialing mode, and you usually end up with your termination code such as busy, disconnect, etc., you can immediately generate that disconnect list with the account information and start your skip trace activity. And if you are using external skip trace resources, you can do that on a waterfall process, where you start with the lower cost skip tracer, see if they get a hit. And if they don't get a hit, then roll them over to a more expensive but potentially higher quality, higher return skip tracing method, and then roll that over. And what you can do the next morning, and you can automate this as you get the results, is place all those skip trace numbers into a Noble Composer application, so that as soon as the collector gets through their early morning calls on predictive, they then go into their Composer skip trace application and start verifying all of those new numbers they have through the skip trace waterfall. And all of that is managed inside the Noble system. And any of those that are found to be good automatically get updated into the collections application. And it can reduce your cycle time in regards to account maturity by as much as 20 to 30%. And that way you can quickly identify the problem accounts that you don't have information on, and you can get that information updated in a very timely manner by automating the process. Now, there are also many things that a collections agent has to do on a call. They have to update collections applications usually. They schedule a callback. They may enter notes, sometimes the same notes, time and time again. They could launch an email or a letter or all sorts of things that have to be done on each call. So what we've done is empower our customers to use one click to do several different, sometimes simultaneous tasks. So, for example, if a collector gets a call, they verify it's a wrong party, they can click one button for, say, wrong party, and if it gets, it'll get coded against that call. It'll then update all the systems. It'll ensure that we don't call it back, and depending on the situation, it could even place it on an exclude list so that it's never called back again. And the last point I'd like to make on improving collector productivity is where we talk about virtual collectors. And the payback on this can be massive. I mean, what we're talking about here is not just collectors, but part of the entire collection strategy to really drive the most from the technology and optimise your investment in your collections operation and technology. So with the latest solutions we have from Noble Systems, you can set up campaigns literally in a matter of a few minutes to launch outbound text to speech messages. Or you can even do an opt-in confirmation such as, is this John Smith, press 1 for yes. And the call gets transferred onto a collector. And you can be running those campaigns even without people in the contact centre with text-to-speech. And Matt will talk to you about how ARMS uses automated messaging a little bit later on. The other piece of virtual collections technology is the ability to take payments in an automated fashion. For example, if you go with a strategy of using automated TDS for out-of-hours work, then having the ability for someone to press 1 to, say, make a payment has obvious advantages in productivity. So, Brad, can you speak at a high level on these next few slides, on how the Noble Management Suite can help optimise agent productivity?
Sure. The next screen that you see on the slide is the agent station screen. It's really our presence management screen where we see what agents are doing at any particular one time. Some agents are actually connected to calls, some agents are in after-call work, some agents are in waiting time. We can actually set alerts for each one of those statuses and have them actually flash up on the screen when they're in exception. This enables the supervisor or the team leader to increase pacing if they're waiting for too long, monitor some agents if they're actually connected for too long, or do any sort of monitoring as a result of them being in exception. In addition to that, we can also move agents between different campaigns and lists depending on the actual hit rate or performance of that list at any one time. And we can see all that information specifically from this screen. In addition to that, we can also click on the agent's head and look at how that agent is performing against the agent in that other agents in that group or in that campaign. This type of reporting allows us to see if that agent should be on the system doing normal collection activity or maybe skip tracing or other admin functionality. So that is the agent station screen. We also have on the next slide a list scheduler module, which allows us to set up lists in advance or campaigns in advance so that we have a strategy for the next week. For instance, Michael mentioned before that we could have strategies around how we call lists, whether we call work or mobiles or home numbers. And we can strategize by setting up these lists in advance and setting up in different formats. So on Monday, we might call the mobiles in the morning, and on Tuesday, we might call the home numbers in the morning. And the results are driven by a Champion Challenger program that allows us to then monitor those performances and better utilize those lists in future. In the next slide here is something Michael touched on, I also want to allow, that is the ability to change the CLI or ANI on a regular basis, giving you the ability to enter the calling number as well as the name of the company to broadcast the CLI on. The reason we show this is to show you how easy it is to do. Some of the feedback that we got on this is that from a strategy point of view, it works well and allows you to mix it up and get people to pick up the phone, which normally wouldn't answer because they already know your company's phone number.
Okay, thanks, Brett. Now, on to the third topic or area of importance, which was managing or maintaining compliance. And I know that compliance is different for every different collections operation. However, there are a number of different areas that are becoming standard via things such as government legislation, and if you collect for clients, the rules set by your clients. Some of those rules, as mentioned, may govern things such as when you record, how many times you're allowed to call, state-based rules versus federal rules versus departmental rules, monitoring capabilities, as well as the reports that can be pulled to verify activity, and the Q&A efforts on various functions by each agent. Now, some of those tool sets that Noble has built into our solution to help you be successful in managing compliance include some of these. Now, once again, configurations to launch tasks. For example, if you're working for clients that have stringent requirements in regards to notes or how systems are tracked, that is, what counts as a contact, what doesn't count as a contact, all of those types of things, we give you the ability to automate them. And you can set up your campaign so that the collector can't dictate whether that's a good or a bad call. And it can't impact whether the notes are put in correctly or not. It's pretty much done for them. So from a compliance point of view, it simplifies the process and enhances your QA process to ensure things such as notes or wrap codes are done in a compliant fashion. With agent guidance and custom screens and scripting, now this is an area that's really grown out of what used to be typically being a sales and telemarketing tool or application within contact centres. And we are finding that this is a really useful tool to help maintain compliance. We are starting to see more and more collections operations go for scripting for collectors, especially their new staff when they walk them through the first handful of calls and the call process, for example. And if you can need to confirm things such as name and address, place of employment as part of compliance, you have the ability to be able to control that with agent scripting and make sure that that is the only information available to the collectors so that they verify the information before it can then move them into the collections effort. Now, with digital voice recording, obviously there are many different rules and laws relating to recording and sometimes just as many different interpretations. What we do is provide you with the recording tool sets so that you can do with them as you like. If you want to record 100% of your calls and keep them for 10 years, the system can do that. If you want to record 20% of your calls and get rid of them every 7 days, you can do that. Whatever you need to remain compliant. Additionally, as an option, you can do screen capture, which can allow you to monitor and record the screen and mouse movements of collectors to see whether they may be having trouble in navigating or finding stuff and hence remaining compliant. And recordings are also very useful from a compliance point of view in handling complaint resolution. Whereas if there's a dispute about what was said in a call, the recording can be used to verify the truth, and the recording can even be converted to a simple format such as a WAV file and sent to clients via email to assist in complaint resolution. With on-screen alerts and feedback, we can provide unique pop-up screens or feedback per list or even per call on unique compliance requirements in regard to collections. and that information can be shown to the collections agent dynamically based on the business rules that is connected to that call. Additionally, we can do speech analytics if required. This enables us to do real-time analysis so that as the system is listening in real time to your calls, you can check for words or phrases that are important to use. So, for example, if the phrase bankruptcy was used on a call, it may trigger a certain compliance script to pop via Composer that walks the collector through a process that helps them deal with a bankrupt client to ensure that you stay in compliance. And now, with or without speech analytics, you could even use the technology to launch a pre-recorded message, recorded in the agent's own voice, that may be required to be said during or at the end of a certain call, thereby staying compliant with things like financial service regulations and relieving the agent of the mundane task of having to repeat often said phrases or disclaimers. Now on reporting, I just want to say that the reporting capabilities are extensive in Noble and provide information to help you, one, determine whether agents are being productive, and two, whether there are trends happening that could point to a compliance issue. I mean, some of our clients are pulling all sorts of reports to identify even simple things like call avoidance, you know, where agents may be prone to dumping or avoiding difficult calls. And then, of course, if you use recording, you have the information to help you back it up when it comes to taking corrective action. So, Brad, we've got a couple more screens here where you can show what we can do to help our customers report on and manage their operations.
Sure. Thanks, Michael. The first screen you have up in front of you is the campaign report. The campaign report allows us to show different campaigns across any historical period or real time and how they're performing in any one period of time, such as, you know, their connect rates, their contact rates, you know, and set alerts associated with them. So if you're looking at conversion rates, promises to pay over a number of contacts we make, we can set up alerts, and if your agents are outside that or if the campaign is outside that threshold, they can email you and advise you that the agents need to be doing a better job in getting promises to pay. Additionally, it also, if you're an outsource, it allows you to see how many man-hours that you've used on that campaign. We can also see the behavioural statistics around pause times, connect times, and any break times, etc. So it's a very powerful report, and again, you can compare campaigns such as 30-day, 60-day, and 90-day campaigns. The next slide is the agent statistics report. The one we're looking at is the contacts per hours, and if you can see across the top, there are additional things that you can look at: calls waiting, total calls complete, etc. And by clicking on one of those, you'll be able to drill down and bring up the numbers for that particular category. And what you see here is the contacts per hour on a different day for each particular agent. So you can kind of compare and contrast how your agent is doing and whether somebody is not performing well.
Okay, thanks for that, Brad. Now, last but not least, I'm going to hand over to Matt Tyler from ARMS Global and have him speak on some of the strategies and practices that they are using at ARMS when driving their Noble technology to help them improve their collections performance. Over to you, Matt.
Great, thanks, Michael. Okay, we rolled out the Noble solution in ARMS about 3 years ago. We've got the Noble Enterprise Platform solution. It's actually covering agents up to 80 plus across multiple sites throughout Australia. Most of our clients are banking and finance or insurance agents. One of the key things that we've done from a quality assurance perspective is to roll out 100% digital recording of all calls, both inbound and outbound, that go through the enterprise system. We've combined that with automated outbound, which features the text-to-speech engine, and I'll come to that in a sec. And we use throughout the business 100% call blending, which has obviously given us the ability to improve the productivity of our agents. And that is also combined in our inbound IVR, again, utilizing the TTS to cover all of our compliance requirements. So what we've done with, for example, our digital recording, we've seen some massive benefits there, simply through the fact prior to having the recording available, if we had a dispute from a client or from a debtor, then it was very much our word against theirs, and we had to rely on the notes the agent had put on the file. Now we have the ability to go back and review any call where we ever have any complaints, and we can even obviously send a copy of that call if required to the debtor or to the client, and we can demonstrate that our agents have indeed adhered to the requirements, or obviously you live by the sword, die by the sword. If we've done it wrong, we also demonstrate that we've done that wrong. but that recording is there 100%, every call, inbound, outbound. Now we've got our IVR tied in with our TTS system, so what that's allowed us to do, whenever we get an inbound call, for example, it comes in and it gets the individual script read to it regarding recording, because obviously we're being recorded, and that is tied in then with our outbound calls. So whenever we have an outbound campaign, obviously we have roughly 1/3 of the outbound calls, when they're answered, are answered by an answering machine. Using the answering machine detection module in the Noble Enterprise solution, it actually picks up when we have an answering machine and passes the call to the text-to-speech engine. Now, what we've managed to get it to do with Noble's assistance is to actually leave an individualized recorded message. Basically, if it was a message for Brad, it would be, this is a message for Mr. Brad Starr. Please call 1-800-089-845 and quote your individual reference number, and then it would leave that number. Now, that has been critical for us. Basically, we've found that 1 in 3 calls, when we're normally on an outbound campaign, would be that automated answering machine. We can now cut all of those calls out, and they are not handled by our agents. That alone has given our agents effectively 50% more penetration into every list, because they are not talking to answering machines. Now that has basically given us the ability then to apply our agents in other areas and to power on through the campaigns. Those call recordings of every call are then reviewed by a quality assurance team, and every agent has a set amount of calls reviewed every month, which gives us the ability to ensure that we are maintaining compliance, maintaining our quality levels. And if there are any training issues, then they can be fed back either on an individual basis or throughout an entire team if there's some other sort of problem. We've also integrated Noble with our collections software systems, WinCollect and Cosmos, to the extent where whenever we make an outbound attempt on a call, it is noted on the file. Every single time a number is called, it is on there. We can track everything we've ever done. Likewise, it also reports back on what kind of answer we got, whether it was a live answer, disconnected number, busy. We've got all of that information, not only from the extensive reporting in Noble, but in our systems there for audit. Obviously, our strategies have been to maximize the amount of benefit we've got from this system, so we pushed that technology. What we look for is to try and recover as much money as possible for our clients within the first 60 days. That is key for us. As soon as the debts start aging, then obviously they become less recoverable. What we've found with our strategies is exactly as Michael said. If you keep doing the same thing you've always done, you will either keep getting exactly the same result or a diminishing result. What we've been able to do is actually use the reporting to identify what our key contact times or our key penetration times are and adjust our strategies towards that. Key to that is also to not keep doing the same strategy, but just to mix it up, to do something unpredictable. If you keep ringing the same person at the same time every day, and at that time they happen to be in work, you're never going to get that person. It's really important to do things differently. The reporting has also allowed us to look at different areas of collector productivity to make sure that we've got agents online at the times we need them, to ensure that we've got adherence to schedule, that they're starting on time, finishing on time, taking the appropriate number of breaks. That is key for us, and it's also given us a significant improvement in our staff attendance. What we've also found with the Q&A is we can actually have all of the call recordings. Yes, they're reviewed by our QA guys, but what we can also then do is actually have that call played back to the agent in that review session. And that really is quite an impressive tool for the collectors, especially when you've got your new starters. What we've been able to do prior to actually rolling out the Noble solution is all our agents had to go through very extensive training schemes, and before we could allow them on the telephones, we had to make sure they were 100% competent. That meant we had to basically train them for a full 4 days before we get them on the phones. Now we're actually able to get new starters on the phones on day 2 and actually start becoming a productive member of staff. rather than actually reducing productivity by A, being there and not generating money themselves, and requiring a one-to-one buddy who is obviously losing their productivity as well. By having this system, it's allowed us to actually have the team leader monitoring and coaching or barging in on calls if required, and having the new agents on the phone day two. And that is really a very, very useful tool for us. Now, as I've said, we use a 100% call blending environment. That gives us a couple of different advantages. Obviously, we can focus on having campaigns running and utilizing the staff who are there and logged in and available on calls, but it's also allowed us to ensure that our quality of service on inbound calls is actually improved. Every inbound call comes in and is prioritized. We can use different methods to actually identify where the calls are coming from. We focus on using the DNIS system, so the 1-800 number comes in and goes to a specific team. But if that team is not available to take that call, then everything is routed to be answered as quickly as possible to maintain that quality of service. Obviously, for that, if we've got different types of calls coming in, then we can have a script that's attached to that and launch different products for the collectors to use. Obviously, we've got different requirements for a medical debt to what we have for a banking and finance or insurance debt. In terms of multiple list management strategies, what we're also able to do is to run multiple different outbound campaigns simultaneously, so that we can focus on banking and finance with one team, or within a team we can have two different campaigns running utilizing the same staff. That obviously gives us much better penetration on those individual campaigns, allows us to make sure that we are utilizing our staff as best as we can, and all at the same time, you've got to remember these staff are in a blended environment, so if there is a call coming in, that staff member will be made available straight away to take it. One of the other key things for us, obviously working in Australia with multiple time zones, especially this time of year, it's very important for us from a legislational perspective that we do not call debtors outside of specified times, i.e. before 7:30 in the morning or after 9 p.m. at night. We have the system set up to deliberately exclude any calls which are, or any areas which are outside of those time zones. It also updates itself when we have daylight savings coming in, so that obviously ensures that we don't make any mistakes. And it is smart enough to exclude on the area code, even if we have a debt that is loaded and says someone's in Queensland, for example. If the telephone number starts with a 02, it will still exclude that number based on the location of the telephone number. So that obviously makes it a very desirable factor for us to make sure that we get it right. Okay, moving on. As I've said, digital recording and training, how has that impacted us? Well, every single call is recorded, and that gives us the ability to review each call with each collector from day one and to give them the feedback they need. The time to train them has been reduced from a full week down to day 2 they're on the phones. Recording for ongoing coaching, that happens from the very first day they're on the phones and is followed up every month. Every collector keeps getting constant feedback, and not just from the recordings, from the live coaching and monitoring that's done by the team leaders day to day as well. That has really given us the ability to take a different approach with our clients. When we were getting complaints previously, as I said, we weren't able to listen to the recording if we didn't have it. Now we can actually go back and support our collectors in an entirely different way. We know they are trained properly. We know they have the ability, and we know that they do their calls properly. We can now take that position with our clients when complaints are received and say, we're doing it right. We know we're doing it right. We have the proof, and we can go and get that. And that's been very important for us. The recording samples, as I've said, that allows us to identify compliance issues, take corrective action as and when required. It's really interesting when you actually see how the group dynamic starts working. If there is a minor change to a script that has been made by someone and it starts spreading from person to person, you can pick that up really quickly. and then retrain that team to ensure that they're adhering again once more. The trends that we start seeing obviously can be acted upon straight away so that we can remain compliant, and then we can use all of the tools to go back and identify, for example, any other calls that we may have made where there may have been an error made. We can go back, use the reporting, identify and correct those. One of the key things that it's allowed us to do is actually give access over the web to our auditors, some of whom are off-site. I do a lot of my work, for example, outside of the office, and I have access to the reporting and the recordings over the internet through our secure portals so that we can work effectively wherever we are. That's really good, obviously, when you're on-site with a client and you're showing them or possibly listening to some of their recordings so you can see exactly how we're handling their work. So obviously that's got massive compliance requirements for us. 100% recording allows us to have confidence in what we're doing and demonstrate to our clients that we're doing the right thing. Okay, now the automated outbound stuff that I've already touched on. That really has been a magnificent tool for us. The ability to leave the outbound individualized messages has freed up all of our collectors from taking 1/3 of their calls being speaking to answering machines to not having to speak to answering machines at all and having that 50% greater productivity. That's freed up our time, reduced our costs, increased productivity. Simple. You get 50% greater list penetration from having that ability. If you compare it to a manual collector who has a list of numbers on a sheet of paper that they're dialing, we are at least 400% more efficient than that person. So it's absolutely fantastic for us. An automatic human collector just on an outbound dialing campaign, we're probably we're at least 50% more effective than them as well. And the key thing is that using the blended environment, we're maintaining our inbound quality of service as well, just from using exactly the same numbers of staff. Okay, I think that's me done, Michael.
Okay, thanks, Matt. So we've got a couple of questions coming in, so I'll just wrap up and then we'll move on to some of the questions. So I guess the one message I'd like to leave you with today is that if you're doing the same thing you always do every day using the technology that you have in the exact same way, there's probably a good chance that you're not really improving. And I know that we've showed you a lot of things today in a very short period of time at a high level, some of which are conceptual, and if you don't have the kind of technology we're talking about in place, it can be very conceptual. But hopefully you'll be able to take some of this away today and have a think about how you can better use some of the current applications you have working for you, and perhaps figure out ways to better mix it up a little than what you're doing now, and to always be looking for a better way to do things and coming up with a better way to collect dollars. And in other words, doing more for less. And if you're always challenging yourself with those questions and calling on people like Noble and asking, hey, look, what should we be doing and so forth to improve the operations we have, I think you'll always be coming up with new ideas that you can test and try as part of your strategy. And remember, there is technology available now that will help you implement new strategies and collect more revenue per collector. Okay, so we've got a couple of questions that have come in. The first one, I might let you answer this one, Brad. Is the Noble solution a software-only solution? That is, does it need an existing PABX phone system to hang off?
No, it is both a software and hardware solution in that we can stand alone without a PABX, but at the same time we can leverage your existing infrastructure. So there is multiple ways that we can integrate with your existing infrastructure, or you can stand alone with Noble. Okay, thanks for that, Brad. Another question that's come in is, I haven't heard of Noble before. How long have you been around? That's a good question. Noble's actually been in operations as a solutions company for over 20 years in the US. It's a privately held global software company of about 300 people, and we've been in operation in Australia for just over 7 years.
so that's how long we've been around for, and we've been delivering the solutions in Australia for that period of time to lots of customers in Australia. I think I mentioned previously 500-seat customers down to 5 seats. So it doesn't really matter how small you are. If you're a startup collections environment, we can still help in that regard. Another question is, who are your vendor partners, or who are your partners in Australia? Good question as well. One of the things that I think that makes us a little bit unique is that we actually don't have a large partner community or a partner community in Australia. That's because Noble likes to be 100% responsible for what they provide as a solution. So when you come to us or we come to you and we start talking about your environment and looking at your operation, all of the solution from the pre-sales design through to the implementation, through to the provision of the software and the hardware, and all of the software is written and owned by Noble. So all of the software and the hardware and the professional services to implement and ongoing support, that's all provided by Noble Systems in Australia. So we don't have third parties getting involved in that way, that there's no finger pointing between partners if something does go wrong and we need to step in and do a fix. So yeah, there's no partner community in Australia because we provide and maintain and service and support all of our solutions 100% ourselves. The last question that's come in, unless we have any more, just looking at the Q&A tab. And you might be able to answer this one, Matt. Hopefully you can remember why you did the business case. Why did ARMS choose Noble over other outbound solutions in the market?
Basically, at the time, we were looking for someone who had the ability to really partner with us. When we rolled out that solution, we needed someone who was able to look at our environment and not just roll out a sort of an off-the-shelf solution, but to really tailor something for us, and that we could work with them to then develop new solutions for issues as we see them. For example, text-to-speech was not being used for leaving specific tailored outbound messages. We were the first company in Australia to do that, and we couldn't have done that without Noble's help. So that really drove the selection for us.
Okay, thanks for that, Matt. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our webinar. We're a little bit early, which is good. I'd just like to thank everyone for participating and hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoon. I'd also like to thank Matt for coming along. We always appreciate it when one of our customers comes along to help out.
You're welcome.
If everyone have any further questions, please don't hesitate to contact us at Noble Australia at the numbers and the email address that is shown on your screen now. And we'll be contacting all of you shortly with information on how you can download a recording of this webinar. So that's it. Thank you and good afternoon.